Good afternoon, or good morning, or good evening, whenever you're listening to this, or if you're on the webinar or on YouTube. Today, we are going to go through the first steps of financial planning. My name is Andrew Talbot, and I specialise in expat financial planning. So being an expat means that you have slightly different circumstances than you would if you'd given local advice, or you're living in your home country. You've got currency, got multiple jurisdictions, and you've got the fact that you may not stay in that country long term, or you may be moving to another country afterwards. So it adds a little bit more complexity to your planning. So today we're just going to go through some of the essential steps that will help you with that planning. It's a series of 3 different webinars, so next time it will be the next level up from that, and then the third one will be a bit more advanced. And we'll go through a live example today, and then some of the basics that you can do when you're doing your financial plan. So I just share my screen with you. You can see that this is the title, First Steps of Financial Planning for Expats. And if we go on to the next slide, leaving your home country. So before you do this, it's always good to sort out your home country taxes. Make sure that you have settled any issues that you have, so that when you return, there's not going to be a big shock. Think about the tax benefits that you can take advantage of. Not every country will have this, but some of the mature tax jurisdictions have allowances or benefits where you accumulate assets whilst you're not in the country. You're not getting taxed on them. Other countries, such as the US, will not have these tax advantages, and you get taxed on everything. But it depends on what your country is and how you can take advantage of this. Once you've done that, it's understanding how long you're going to be outside of the country. So what are your goals and what are your objectives? As we just said, you're not likely to be in that country for a long time. So you got to understand what you want from your money, your finances, your investment portfolio, anything. Work out what you want to do at the end of the period that you've been there. So sometimes you can have an expat position, which is just a short-term assignment, or a 2 or 3 year period. And at the end of that period, you're going to go to another country, or you're going to return home. So you know that, okay, that's what the period is. So at the end of that period, what would you like to achieve with the finances? Would you like to have paid down your mortgage, bought a house, been able to turbocharge those finances by having an investment portfolio, or would you just like to have a load of cash in the bank that you can make a decision when you return? So it's looking at, okay, what do you want to do at the end of the period that you will either return or go to another country? So those objectives are very important. Investments is just one part of your overall financial life. So for instance, retirement, it's, as William Sharp says, it's the nastiest, hardest problem in finance. And it is between deciding how much to save and how much to spend throughout your life. You also have to make guesses about the future. What will inflation be? How long will I live? What kinds of return will the assets provide? The list goes on. We hopefully can help you with these type of questions. We can give you the plan, and we can go through all these assumptions to show you what the implications are on making your decisions. There's always 3 stages in the planning. The first stage is why. We just talked about that, understanding those goals and objectives. And this is the most important stage. How you achieve that could be an insurance policy, it could be a buy-to-let portfolio, it could be a private bank platform, it could be any type of vehicle that lets you hold an asset to achieve the why. Where is just the detail that goes with it. So if you have US shares in Apple or Tesla or Microsoft, then they need to be held on generally an investment platform. And the reason why you're holding it is probably because you want to retire off them. So those are the different steps. Stage 1 is in the most important part. Stage 2, the how, is normally about how efficient and how cost effective that vehicle is. And step 3 is the detail to make it all work So it's understanding how that sits in within your financial plan. Emergency cash, always have this. It's regardless of your wealth. There's always going to be a liquidity issue at some point in your financial life. You'll need to access money as quickly as possible. As an expat, this becomes even more important because you will be living in a second country and your assets may be in a third country, and you need to be able to leave very quickly. You might need to settle a tax before you can leave. You might be able to need to get out of a house rental, or the kids need to be have their school fees paid before you can leave. It's understanding, okay, what are your future liabilities? What are these expenses that you need to be able to hold whilst you're living in that country? So if your visa says you can only live in a country after you've left your job for 30 days, then you need to work out, well, how many expenses do I need in order to leave? And that's normally settling your tax before you go. 3 to 6 months expenses is generally recommended. I think in the expat world, it is understanding, okay, what are your expenses? So you write them out, and then what can you cover from in different circumstances or scenarios. So you've got to just run through those plans. You can do a spending plan, which is just really a case of writing down what you're spending every month, or those future expenses or future liabilities that are going to come up. And then just saying whether or not you can fund them for emergency cash, or fund them from income, or fund them from different assets. But understanding what that plan is will help you with your eventual aim of creating wealth. If you spend more than you earn, your assets will go down. Doesn't matter what your wealth position is, your assets will decrease. And we've seen lots of different people with different levels of income and assets, and if their income is less than their expenses, they will start to lose money. It's just the way that the world works. We always think a 1-year plan is just a budget or a spending plan. A spending plan is a better term for it. So you know what you're going to spend in this coming year. If you're taking a year off, or you're going to another country, then it's a little bit difficult to work out what this is. But you can allocate certain amounts to whatever those future expenses are going to be. After sort of the first year and over 2 years, it's about habits and goal setting. So the end of that period that you're working overseas, what do you want to achieve? Is that goal setting? Are you in good habits? We'll talk about some of that shortly. And then after that, it's really sort of 5 years, or after the 2 years, it's the compounding effect of your investments and understanding cash flow forecasting, and really what are those longer term goals, and how are you going to plan for them, and how you're going to fund it. You can have a look through your statements and work out where your money goes through. That's part of the budget or the spending plan. This is quite a good summary of it. A budget is, or a spending plan, we should probably use that terminology, is just understanding where your money goes every month or every year, just to make sure that you're on track. And everyone should do this regardless of their wealth size. I find there is plenty of examples of third generation families spending all the money, or lottery winners being bankrupt after a couple of years, or professional sportsmen, after they're finished, suddenly they've got no money left. And it's just normally coming down to, okay, what's your spending habits? What is your spending plan? Do you need to work this budget out? You can look at pensions and social security. So does your country offer any of this? It may help with state pensions, but it almost help with understanding whether or not you get healthcare when you return. Just normally a quick look to see whether or not you can do this. For example, the UK has voluntary national insurance contributions, which will entitle you to a state pension, and it's understanding what that local country position is. The eventual aim of, say, retirement is not the goal, it's financial independence is the goal. So it begins with eliminating the need to borrow to sustain your lifestyle. Social security or pensions is just another source of income that you can help to maintain that level. That comes back to that spending plans and the budgets as well. Then we come on to debt. There's good debt and there's bad debt. Bad debt being credit cards or short-term loans, and good debt is when you take on debt to buy an asset, such as a house, or you get a mortgage to fund your buy-to-let portfolio, or you take a loan against your share portfolio in order to expand the assets. You could always overpay your mortgage, just understanding, okay, whether or not that fits in with your desire or your goals. But normally a case of paying off bad debt is important. If you have credit cards as an expat, they give you great miles and they give you great benefits. Just make sure you pay them at the end of the month in order to get the benefits from them. Insurance or protection, we call it. Depending on your country, you may have insurance already, but it may not cover you in this the location you're currently in. So you have to look through the insurance policy and make sure that, okay, will they pay you even though you've moved to another country, or is it excluded? You may be that they will for a certain period, but after a year living in one country, your insurance policy will lapse. The same with if you're changing company and you're moving to a new company overseas, what are the benefits that they offer you, the employee benefits, or is your current employer, does those employee benefits extend to you once you're overseas? If you've got dependents on you, then insurance is incredibly important. You can use insurance for legacy planning at a later stage, but it is understanding, okay, what is the risk of your human capital if you're unable to work or you're not around? What's the impact on your family or loved ones? And then we come on to savings and investments. So savings is really about putting money aside bit by bit, often to pay for something specific like a holiday or a home deposit, or to cover emergencies that may crop up. And it usually involves just putting money into a cash account, such as savings account in a bank. Whereas investing, on the other hand, is taking your money and you're trying to make it grow by buying things that are increasing value, such as stocks, property, shares, bonds, anything that's going to increase your asset base in value. Investing involves committing money generally to an investment vehicle in the hope of making this financial gain. So we are into the concept of stage 2, where we're trying to find an investment vehicle, but your investments are really there for the longer term. It's a greater risk than, say, savings, because there's no guarantee that you'll get your money back. We'll go on to some of the risks and the informed and uninformed risks later on. And investment products or platforms are longer term, and they really should be suitable after you've got your emergency cash positioned and you've got your savings to a certain level. Then you look at investing. You should make savings and investing a habit. So set it up automatically. Make sure that you're paying off those credit cards every month. Make sure that the money is automatically leaving your account on the day that your income comes into the account and you're moving it around. The automation will just save you time and effort. In the next stage of this webinar, we will go into greater detail about some of the techniques that surround this. So then we come on to a bit more about investing. And investments, it depends on your current finances, your future goals, your ability to take a potential loss, especially at the moment when we're in what we call a temporary decline. Markets will always return. It's just the time that you can stomach them almost. So the investor behavior is very important. And we will come on to this. We'll talk about more of this as we go through this series. But your attitude to the risk is subjective, and it can be influenced by current events or experiences. So at the moment we are in March. We are going through a huge temporary decline due to global events. And it's understanding how comfortable you feel with this market risk. If we did a risk profile questionnaire or a risk profile interview, your reactions are likely to be different to if markets were going up at the start of the year. That's just human nature. You should consider what your goals are. So at the start, we said, what do you want to do when you leave the country you're in? There's short-term goals, there's medium-term goals, and there's long-term goals. So you have to understand what that means. And then your investments should be linked to these goals. It's not necessarily about whether you're a balanced investor, whether you're 1 to 10 on a risk scale. There is other ways to manage this risk or understand what that risk is. When it comes to your investments, there's 3 factors that will affect the return: cost, asset allocation, and human behavior. Cost is the biggest determination to return. If it's costing you 5 or 6% per year to run that investment, you have to make that 5 or 6% before you get any kind of return. And that's with or without inflation. Sometimes people try to save money on like a $3 coffee. Well, actually, the areas that matter is you should be saving your investment fees. It could save you tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of dollars or pounds or euros if you look at that area. Your asset allocation, again, is very important, and this comes back to your goals. So if you need to save for retirement, then your investing period could be 30, 40, 50 years. You could be in your 80s and 90s and still having an allocation to equity investments because you need to get the return. And we will come on to this later in this series. We'll touch on it shortly. And then the third stage is human behavior. To err is to be human. But your ability to not react to current events will make a big difference to whether or not your returns in your portfolio happen. And they are all linked together. So if we can go through those levels, that's whether or not you will be successful in that planning. Wealth is a number of days you can survive without working whilst maintaining your preferred lifestyle. Nice little quote. So how do you do it? So we use financial planning software, and I'll give you a quick example of what this is right now. So let's share this plan. We have a timeline along the bottom: pre-retirement, retirement, and slowdown of a fictional couple with 2 kids. So they've got kids going to go to university, they're going to graduate. Aaron, who's one of the parents, wants to buy a house, wants to buy 2 houses at certain points. He wants to have a 50th birthday celebration. So we're building this plan, and these are all of their goals. So when we build it for you, it's completely bespoke. It's like, what do you want to do? You can change these pre-retirement or retirement, so you can retire a little bit later, and we'll change that period. So you could work a little bit longer, or you could retire a little bit earlier, depending on what your circumstances would be. We then get a dashboard, which will show an income level each year, which is the blue columns, and then the black is an expense. So at some point here, he's buying that first buy-to-let property, and then he's going to buy this holiday home at this level. And it's understanding, okay, what is that future liability? So we talked about expenses before. This is a longer term milestone goal that he wants to run. And then when he gets to this retirement, the red is a shortfall. So it's a case of, okay, what do you need to achieve to remove that shortfall? So if we go to our insights and we looked at, say, the investment returns, it could say, okay, what's the required rate of return that he needs to do to remove those that investment? In this case, it's quite a high level of 8%, which would be one strategy, is to make sure his asset allocation is sufficient enough that this period when he's in his 70s and 80s, he's had the right allocation throughout his life to make sure that that is fine. Or we can do a annual savings to say, well, how much would you need to save each month into something else in order to remove that red? It's only 4,000 per annum. So the planning is helping him depending on what the scenario would be. So if we wanted to change the retirement date and move it a little bit earlier, he's fed up with his job, wants to go traveling, the kids have probably just finished university there, or Daniel, his son, has just finished university. So it's a case of there's probably a little bit more red there now. Okay, so how much extra does he need to save per month in order to make sure that that red has disappeared? It's doubled him in the amount that he needs to save. So the more goals, the more planning that you can do, the more we understand what those future liabilities are going to be, the more you can build the plan and then understand how your investments should be linked to those goals, and how your spending and your own circumstances should not be affected by your short-term positions or what happens in markets today. Just go back to financial planning software. This is a example I got from another advisor, which is pretty good, and it's lots of different goals going into the future. And you can see that there's lots of different stages, and they want to travel when they're in their retirement. So it's a good visual to see what's your plans? How do we build something that is specifically bespoke for you? Financial plan is a map with a route drawn on it, but financial planning is a sat nav that constantly adjusts that route and even the destination. So everything should be flexible in that sense. So when it comes back to the asset allocation, given enough time, and time is the big factor in here, investing in the great companies of the world will generally produce a better return than investing in fixed income or cash. You've got to understand what your goals are, so you've got to identify them and plan them, take into account those emergency money and all the other contingencies, and then invest your cash surplus. So the difference between investing and savings. The longer you don't need the cash, generally the more it should be in equities. This is an example of uninformed risk and informed risk. So generally, if you go to an advisor, they do a financial plan risk profile with you, and you say, right, you're a 5 on the risk scale. Like, what does that mean? That's uninformed risk. Cash deposits are normally seen as very low risk, but when you take into account inflation over a longer period, that cash deposits will just be eroded. So the risk level of becomes higher. If you own that one single share in Facebook or Microsoft or Apple or Tesla, then there is a potential that you could have a loss of capital in the future. That's your risk, is the complete loss of capital. Owning a global equities in a one fund is just volatility. That's your risk. It's in the future or now. If you had to sell those investments now because you needed to spend your money, then that's the volatility risk. That's market risk. So you got to understand where your portfolio sits, how it relates to your goals, and then what is the actual informed risk that should be applied to your portfolio. So it's very bespoke. It's not about doing an investment risk profile questionnaire and you're going into a balanced fund. Everyone I've noticed always goes into a balanced fund. It's really down to the individual of how they construct their life, their goals. We have a sort of investment philosophy, and we define risk as the probability of a shortfall against your predetermined cash or capital goal. Talked about the goals, we've realized, okay, where each of those future liabilities are going to be, what you want to do into your life. The risk is you're not going to hit those goals because you either in cash, you go eroded by inflation. Your portfolio was designed wrong because it's not taken into account when you're going to spend that money. So alpha is created through the financial planning advice, generally not by a fund manager or someone who is an asset allocator. The investing is more about the psychology and less about the maths. So it's that human behavior when it comes to your financial life. And markets generally are up around 70% of the time in a 1 year period, and they're generally down during the remaining 30. So if we looked at 2020, I think by the end of this year, 31st of December, if we looked at it, they're probably going to be up 70% of the time. They're probably going to be down 30% of the time, every day. Even in the last couple of weeks, we've had this temporary decline, steep temporary decline. Some days, actually, the markets are up. Some days they're down. You've got to stay in during the 30% to enjoy the 70, and it comes back to that human behavior. This is a great graphic from a guy called Andy Hart, who does Maven Money, and it is what he calls it a financial prescription, or it's a one-page financial plan. He does a really good podcast, so by all means go and look him up, or if you can't find it, send me a message and I'll send you the link to it. And it's a plan that everyone should stick to regardless, I think, of your wealth. So pay off your bad debt, crappy debt as he calls it, take control of those expenses, build the emergency fund, insure against these bad health surprises, or that's the protection, that's the life cover. Pay yourself first, invest regularly, more than you think, invest wisely, understand the informed risk and uninformed risk, use the tax breaks we talked about at the start, update your financial plan annually, never react to markets, which is pretty prevalent at the moment, tune out the market noise, understand the financial side effects of volatility and also inflation, and then stick to the plan. So very wise words, and it is really about how do you do financial planning as an expat. It's not going to differentiate too much from that. The next stage will go into greater detail about some of the investment platforms that are out there and some of the greater detail about how you should build your financial plan. In the meantime, by all means, get in contact with me on these various different channels, and hope to speak to you soon. Thank you very much.